Okay, so welcome to our Parts Inventory Control webinar today. We are going to cover more about the actual part record in this webinar, whereas on the Life of a Part webinar, I think we did in March or April, we covered how parts are entered into the system and tracked financially on the general ledger. Well, today we're going to focus more on the actual parts itself, reviewing the part record as it applies more to the item information rather than the tracking tools. But learn a little bit more about the stocking, how the reorder reports work. We'll touch on the cross-reference a little bit, as that's always an issue that comes up, and touch on just on the barcode feature just so you guys know what's available out there, and as well as a little bit on the cores. So today I'm really hoping to have a pretty interactive group letting me know how you guys are using the part record, what features you're using in it. As you know, we always take your feedback, and we're always enhancing the product based on how you're using it, what you like, what you don't like. And of course, you guys know we are, of course it's still in beta right now, but we are coming out with a new update which is really going to advance our cross-reference ability and change that cross-reference so that when you do look up parts by cross-reference, it will give you more information based on the part record information, not just that cross-reference number. And we'll go into those details a little bit here in a minute. So let's start with just opening up a part record. Move this over here. Let's just, for fun, I have an oil filter here. So this number, I can tell you right now because there's spaces in it. What I do a lot, and I did this a lot when I was using MaxxTraxx in the shop, was I would order parts online. I lived for WorldPack, and we actually use factory motor parts extensively, which is our AC Delco motorcraft supplier at the shop I was working at. So whenever you order a part online and import it into, transfer it to your repair order, it automatically creates a parts record if you have it set up in your system to add catalog parts to inventory, which I did. And in the parts record, add a part record, you guys might recall that there are a few fields that have little red stars, little red asterisks next to them, and this means that these items have to be filled in. So those items are the part number, the part description, the part type, condition, which I think defaulted to new, and product code. So those are some things that whenever you import a part over, that's automatically filled and you don't need to actually add anything else. But now you could see I kind of have a bare bones record here. In fact, I did import the price as well. But as far as user charges, all this other information, I imported it the first time from WorldPack, this actual part number. So you can see it made WorldPack their the primary vendor right off the bat. And of course, this didn't have any cores, so it didn't bring any core information over. However, if I did import a part record that had a core, it would bring it over and activate this and fill this in with my core cost. Cross-reference, of course, was left blank and there were no notes. So that's what comes over when you import a part record, which, like I said, we used extensively. The new update is going to be able to search for this part number with or without spaces. Spaces, dashes, slashes, that kind of thing. So where you may have this one part in inventory with no spaces, if you imported it, it would create a separate record. So that's something that we're getting fixed, and I just want you to know it's coming out in the next release. But a few other things I want to look at in the part record. We have the SKU field. So if you use a barcode reader in your shop, you have an option when you use it at a part wizard to enter in a SKU number. So if this part did have a SKU, let's just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just for fun. This is how this barcoding would interact in the system when you're writing a repair order. You would actually go to your RO, go to add a part from a part list, and just select to search by SKU. Then you would hit the barcode reader and your part number would show up, and in this case it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was our SKU number. but this would be our part number, and then we would just hit enter and it would add it to our RO. That's how the SKU feature works, which I actually personally have never used the barcode reader in the program. When I was actually using MaxxTraxx Pro CE, we actually didn't have that feature in there. But you can see, search by SKU, put in the SKU number, which the barcode reader does automatically. I don't have to type it in, of course. It will bring up my part. So I just wanted to show you that one feature. I don't know how much you guys had familiarity with barcode reader, especially if you didn't have one. How would you know how it works? So I wanted to show you a little bit about that. So let's go back. Oops, go back into my part search. Look at a part record. Actually, let me go by SKU to find that one part again. Whoops, typing wizard. Okay, so that's how the SKU number works here. Of course, our description. Now, manufacturer, this is left blank. Where this information is populated automatically is if you guys import catalogs. And I actually only use this for importing my tire catalog list. So we did a lot of tires at this shop because we did, we're in snow, so we did a lot of snow tire promotions, that kind of thing. So that would automatically enter in this information. However, after you add a part through the Add a Part wizard, you do have the ability to click on Select and create a manufacturer, a line, and a class as much as you want. So that's a customizable field. Category is still under development. We're going to be using this for another feature down the road, but right now it's inactive and you can't even use it for your own purposes. And as I mentioned, there are a few things that you have to have entered into every part record other than the number description is a condition. And new, used, or rebuilt, which a lot of states, and I think most states actually require that you put this on your repair orders as a legal requirement as to the condition of the part. Location. This is all about parts inventory control. I think this is priceless. We did stock a fair amount of stuff. In the last shop I worked at, we did mostly fluids, of course, and filters. But I also worked in another shop in Idaho that was a little bit more remote. We did all of our rubber. We did belts and hoses. So this location code is very cool. Not only does it let you know where your part's located, if you want to just go do an actual physical check, do I actually have one in stock, if it says I have one in stock, but it also lets you run a physical inventory, which I want to talk about a little bit later. And you can order your physical inventory by location. So it makes it easy to print out your physical inventory worksheets and just go into that section and just start counting off all your parts. It's by location first, and then it's by part number second to that. Like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Product codes, which I didn't go into too much detail on the Life of a Part webinar back in March or April. I think it was in March. I wanted to talk a little bit about this and how it's used. A product code is assigned to every single part in your system. It actually is assigned also to every single labor service in this system if you choose labor from labor list. Now it defaults to GI, which stands for General Inventory. But if I click on Select, I could decide I want to track my filters separately because I want to run a report, or I want a valuation, which we're also going to talk about here in a moment under reports, because that's part of my parts inventory control. I really want to have the ability to track and quantify my investment because you guys know you spend so much money on parts. If you can plug some holes as to parts that get lost, parts that don't get sent back to their vendor, parts that are special order that need to be get back to a vendor within a certain time period, or heaven forbid, parts that just don't get put on the customer bill, that's really the whole purpose of today's webinar, to learn some of these tools. So I can track by product code different parts, and then without getting too much into the financial details, I can let it default to these general ledger accounts numbers right here. And you can see the general inventory is your $13,000, $40,000 for sales, $50,000 for your cost of goods. So I can assign as many product codes in here as I want. I convert shops all the time from older systems, from MaxxTraxx or our old SE Windows program, and I have people in here with 200 product codes. Now, what I do find most of the time is that they really do let them just all default to the same general ledger account on the system, but it lets them slice and dice their inventory to be able to see, you know, how much are they stocking of this part or that part. So I actually see a lot more of this than I actually thought was being used. I actually just did general inventory and tires in our shop. That's the only way I divided up. Anybody here use product codes in the system? Anybody on the call?
No.
So pretty much everybody's just using general inventory for all of their parts?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions about this, or do you guys think this is something that might be valuable, the ability to assign a product code to a part to segment?
I can see where it would be valuable. Just haven't done it yet.
Okay. We are also coming out with a new report, which of course this last update has probably 50 or 60 new reports. We actually are having a report that you can do a profit center analysis by custom product codes. So I can say I want to segment out, for example, maybe all of my tune-up parts. And actually at a time we used to actually really use a lot of product codes. The last couple of shops though we didn't. But I have actually, when I used MaxxTraxx in the early 90s, we did a lot of product code because of course we inventoried so many more parts 15 years ago than we do today. But we really use a lot of product codes to be able to segment that out. But what we're going to be able to do now is run a profitability report to see, maybe for tune-up labor and tune-up parts, I can run a report and see what my profitability is there. I could also run a profitability report by product code that says how profitable am I in tires. And of course, we never get the margins in tires like we do in other parts of our business. But you're going to have that ability to get more detailed information on how well you're doing in one area or another, or even one product line or another. Again, that's all going to be product code driven, so that may be something you guys might want to take a peek at in the next release. And I am going to be doing a webinar that goes over the latest features in the next release once it finally comes out. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about that report and how to use it, we definitely will cover that in that webinar. So keep an eye out for it. So that's
one quick question before you leave there.
Yeah.
Can you go back? So if you create a battery product code, right now you can run a report and it'll give you that financial, it'll extract the batteries from that income account, that cost of good account, it'll separate them out?
That's in our latest release. That's actually in 5.0.2.0, okay, which is not out yet. But that's a profitability one that we actually built specifically for Bob Kraft. We did that.
So if you run a product report on batteries, what do you get?
Let's look. So if we go into reports, go under inventory, and if we want to look at our, let's say, let's see, I always have problems seeing this one. Okay, inventory valuation. Let's see, run report. I can search by product code. I can say, I don't know if I actually have any in here. Battery, I think it was singular, I'm not positive. Let's see if I have any in there. Okay, I don't actually have that. I'd use it as an example. But I can actually run a valuation to see how much I have in here. So that's kind of what, one of the tools that we have to see, again, by manufacturer, which is another great idea, especially because we sell tires. We could see, well, how much do I have of Nokian? How much do I have of Toyo? How much do I think of my different, Gizelbed, different snow tires, how much am I carrying in inventory for these different, which actually would help me the following year. Let's say I wanted to floor a certain amount of tires for a snow tire sale, or you guys might want to do this for air conditioning parts or something like anything you buy on consignment. Batteries is another one we bought on consignment. If you could let your vendor know the volume that you're looking to do or looking to carry based on prior years, you have access to this information. So you may ask for different terms. You may ask them to floor a certain dollar amount. So this just is all really information for you to make those decisions. that's a little bit about that report. Let me jump back into a part search. Back to this oil filter just for fun. So that's a little bit more about how product codes are used. And again, like I said, I'm not going to go too much into detail on this because this could be an entire webinar in itself. But you can see here tires are tracked in a different section on my general ledger. So I can actually, on my financials, break it out and see, so how am I doing in tires? How much am I actually doing in sales of tires? Whereas maybe that's something I need to start marketing to. Maybe that's a big enough part of my business. Really never, in my experience, was a core part of the business, but it was a good way to keep your customer from going anywhere else where they may have other general repair type work done. So we try to be kind of the one-stop shop, so we always offered in tires. But like I mentioned, since we don't get the margins in this, you can always look and see, is it worth it to me? Is it really worth it for me to be flooring this inventory? Do I need to buy another tire balancer? Does it make sense? How much work do I actually get out of this? And do I need to get another tire guy? Or am I better off getting somebody more like an ATAC? Again, it gives you that information to be able to make those management decisions. So that's a little bit about product codes. Here, all this down below is all just user definable. Popularity code is just, you know, how it, and we don't actually have a report to run on popularity code, but some people just wanted this custom field, so we built it. Weight is if you ship, if you do a lot of mail order. Size is a searchable field, so this is very important. When we had a tire part number, I mean, I had an actual part number for our tires, and then in my description I might put, you know, P, you know, 175, whatever the size was. But then I would always put size in here. That way I could do a search for on my inventory list to be able to see what I could offer a particular customer. In addition to that, we also have the tire quote capability. And this tire quote capability is built off of the size. So that's why it's another important field to actually fill out. You know, I have worked with tons of shops that do nothing.
Hello?
Sabrina? Yeah.
So, oh, this is Sabrina. I'm so sorry. Sabrina, listen, I need to put you on hold. I got a customer coming in I got to take care of here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I'll be right back with you.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. Hey, Nick, I just put you on. I just brought you into the group. And Rosemary. Okay, here, Rosemary, you can talk now in the group. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize you were still muted.
That's all right.
So that talks a little bit of, again, how we can slice and dice by size. We can also run those reports. We'll get into a little bit by size. Like I said, it was a great feature in that tire quote field as well. Brand ID is completely up to you. In part type code, again, right now is completely user definable, but this is another part of a catalog feature we're going to be including. You know, one thing I did want to talk about was fluid. I had a brand new shop that came on in July, and in their practice version they had made fluid, they had checked this fluid box, and they just kind of thought, well, shoot, it's a fluid, it's oil or antifreeze or whatever, I'm going to track it as fluid. What happens, guys, when you actually check this fluid box is it shows this part, let's say if it was oil, this actually would show up as its own subtotal on a repair order. And it, instead of saying being in the parts category, it's in the fluid category. On your sales tax report, it comes up in its own category. Personally, I'm not so much a fan. I'll be honest with that. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's see. Because I think it's an important feature that I don't think a lot of people understand until it's too late. So I'm going to go ahead and add part from part list. I'm going to add 10W30. But before I add it, I'm going to click the Edit button to edit the master record. And then I'm going to check the fluid box. And now I'm going to select it to my repair order. Let's do 5 quarts. And then if I were to preview this repair order and scroll to the bottom, check this out. So here's my parts, and here's my oil under fluid. So I think it takes it's a very specific feature for a very specific type of shop to use that fluids feature. So I just kind of want to touch bases with that because I think a lot of people are using it as default out the gate and not really understanding how it's going to show up for your customer and also how it shows up on your reports. And I stand to be corrected, but yeah, I think it's just on our reports. I was thinking it might show up on our general ledger somewhere else, but it doesn't, as long as the product code is still, as long as the product code is still general inventory. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Because like I said, I think you really need to have a good understanding of how you want to use that fluids feature before you select it. So that's a little bit about the fluids. Now, a buyout part, this is automatically checked every time you add a part to your system. If you have it selected to add to inventory, so you want it to show up in inventory, but if you have it selected as a buyout part, it's not considered an inventory part on your inventory reports. Kind of a little bit tricky. Let's go into setups real quick and see what I'm talking about here. So under setups on the menu bar, under repair order and parts invoices, we have our inventory setup here on the left. So I have an option, which I obviously have turned on. You guys can see. Of course, I track my inventory. I can add catalog parts to my inventory list. So every time I buy a part from factory or buy a part from WorldPack, it automatically is going to create a part record, right? Remember I said it with just those few features, part number, part description, was it condition, product code, and of course price. Those things are automatically filled out. Now I also have an option here to add my buyouts to inventory list or not. Let's talk a little bit about what a buyout part is and what kind of record is created in the system. So I'm going to uncheck it. I'm going to go back into this repair order. Now I have the ability to, let's get rid of this filter for example. Let's say I'm getting a filter for this Saturn, but I never ever plan on seeing that filter again because maybe this is a very unusual vehicle. So if I were to add a part and select to add a part as a buyout or quick part, the reason why it's called a buyout or a quick part is a buyout, because remember I just unchecked it. I'm not going to add buyouts to my inventory. That means it's only going to show up this one time on this repair order. Let's see what it looks like. So I may put in here a part number, let's just say 99999, and we're going to call it an oil filter. And see, I have it not listed to add to my inventory list, but I can say my cost was, let's say, $3, and it's coming up with my suggested list because it's using my parts price matrix. Okay, that's where this came up with. But, you know, let's see if I can change it here. Let's say I'm just going to mark up this one part. Let's see, I can't change it here, but I can, let's say if I mark it up just to $6. Okay, so I'm just going to sell this to my customer for $6. Let's see, I also have to change my adjusted price to $6. So what will happen is this part won't show up on my inventory list. So I'm going to click OK. So if I go to add a part from list, and I type in 99999, it's not there. And it's not there because I called it a buyout part. I'm never going to use it again. Okay, that's a little bit how that works. Now a couple things about this. When you add a buyout part, and you do put a cost in here, if you are tracking your accounting, it will give you a cost. But you'll notice that I don't have to enter in a restock parts ticket for this. So it never goes into, you know, from here, I don't enter a restock parts ticket. It never goes into my inventory, into my 30,000 account, and then gets transferred to my 50,000 account when I close out the RO, like all of our other parts do. Okay, so I don't actually have a record of it. In fact, I really don't even have a way to look up, you know, who I bought it from or how much I paid for it. Now I can put in here, let's say I put in WorldPack, and it was on, you know, this invoice number. So I have this in history, if I go back to this repair order and look at my detail. Okay, so that's a little bit about how the buyout part works. Now the other thing you can do is if you do add this to inventory, you notice my vendor gets grayed out, but now let's say I do want to add this part to inventory, then I do have some information in my inventory, but I stand to be corrected. I don't think it's going to tell me my purchase history. But that's why then I may call it a quick part, because this is just another way to get this part into my inventory quickly. So instead of going to add parts, add a part from part list and then hit the add part wizard, you can see instead of actually going through the whole wizard, you just have to fill out this much information. Personally speaking, I've tried it a couple different ways. I've tried doing, timing myself to use the quick part feature versus the add a part feature. You know what, I really didn't notice that much time savings. So I actually don't use this very often. Now what I do occasionally, maybe 6 times a year, use the buyout part feature for and not add it to inventory, is let's say I want to put a part on here that I yanked off of an old junker in the back. If I had a truck in the back 40 and I pulled some bushing off of it. So I wanted to get it into my system, but remember with my add a part wizard, it's going to ask for a cost, it's going to ask for a beginning, starting inventory. You're going to create the part number, and then the system's going to say, well, Sabrina, you got to buy that part. You got to enter in a restock parts ticket, a restock parts invoice. Now with a buyout or quick part, if I'm not going to ever buy it ever again, I'm not going to stock it because I just, took it off of another vehicle in the back, and I don't have a cost for it, because as I always tell you guys in training, try to do as much in your shop, try to enter into the computer in real life what you do in your shop. Try to make them as parallel as possible. And if I actually didn't have a cost for this, it would say 0. And then I may sell it for $5, but I still don't have a cost because I actually didn't buy it from anybody. So it says you have not entered a cost. Are you sure you want to continue? Well, in this case, yes, because yes, in real life, I actually did not have to pay a cost on that. So I wanted to cover a little bit between buyout parts and that quick part feature. Again, I don't use it very often. So let's look really quick and see if it added to my parts list. Yeah, it did, because I checked that box that said add to inventory. Now, so it is going to say a -1 here. So if I were to make an adjustment right here, let's say hit edit, go into stock, and adjust it up because it's 1. I need to adjust it to, I'm going to add 1 into inventory. I got it out back. My cost will be 0, and here are my initials. So there is no cost associated with it. But if I want to keep my inventory straight, so you can see, why would I add it to inventory, right? Why would I click that add to inventory box if I wasn't going to put an amount in the system? I'd have to go through this whole rigmarole and adjust my stock. I would have been better off leaving that 1 box unchecked, which of course once I check that box, it changes my screen, because now I actually have a part record. You can see it's different. Any questions on that, guys? For me, I really struggled with the whole buyout concept for a really long time. It's mostly designed for shops that aren't going to track inventory on those parts. You guys ever in a situation where actually had a shop last week that he pulled 2 used tires out of his dumpster because this lady came in and she had a minivan and the cords were showing and she didn't have any money. So they actually put 2 used tires on there, and they said, well, Sabrina, how do I get that on there? Well, we actually add a part. We did a buyout, and actually the part number, we just put used tire. This is what we did for our part number, because we weren't buying it from anywhere. Our cost was 0, and I think they gave it to her for $15, something along those lines. So can you guys see an application for that?
Yeah, we
okay, I'm hoping that most of you guys are going, no, I track my inventory, and I would never use that. But there is a place for it. There is a reason why you would want to use that. Okay, so I wanted to cover a little bit of that. Now let's go back into a part record.
Hang on one quick second. I heard somebody say they had something they were using it for. Who spoke up there for a second? What are you guys using it for?
Oh, that was me, Nick. Well, we use the buyouts not really for what Sabrina was showing there with the used tire situation, but just when we enter our parts in, I like to track everything. So a lot of times we'll just enter a part in, it automatically posts inventory, and then we pull it right back out of inventory when we do the sale. But that's what we use it for, is just mainly to see that the part was entered and sold and that there is actually a record of it.
So are you using it as a buyout?
For non-stocking.
Or as a quick part? Okay.
Yeah. For non-stocking parts, yeah, that we do it that way most of the time, so we have some kind of trail of what we did.
And Nick, did you have this box checked right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have
So
it defaulted to do that.
If you check this box, and remember in setups, I can default to add my buyout parts to inventory, right? But if you check this box, you're actually converting this feature to a quick part function. Not necessarily a buyout anymore, it's just a quick part function. Because if you're not going to stock the part, you don't need all that detail, location and all that information that you may not even care about the parts price matrix. You're just going to throw it in, here's your cost, and this is what you're going to sell it for. So the second you check this box here, or check it in setups, it changes. This whole feature changes from more of a buyout tool to a quick part tool. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Walter? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay, good. Okay, so we covered that.
Sabrina?
Yeah.
So if you're ordering a part from Napa and you don't plan to ever use that filter again, you're doing it through your order parts so that you set up an invoice to Napa, or what?
You know, Julie, I still do. Yeah, because I do want to. Well, first of all, are you on charge with Napa?
No, just take a manual invoice. They go down to the Napa store and they buy a filter and they walk in the shop and they hand me the invoice.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to do it on order parts, but if we're not going to assign that to inventory, do I just do it as a regular new part and just non-inventory?
Yes. Yes, because remember the difference, really the only difference, let's go into the part record. The only difference between, I'm hooked on this filter, the only difference between a stocking part and a non-stocking part is this.
Right.
Which is a great segue. That's exactly where I was going to go next. If you have an amount in here, then it is a stocking part. If these are zeros, it's a non-stocking part, and they won't show up on any of your reorder reports, anything like that. Now, it will show up on your physical inventory worksheet, which I've had a lot of comments on lately. But and thanks, by the way, for your input, folks, on how many people do inventories. Actually, about half the people on the call don't do inventory at all. And frankly, if you don't stock any parts, I could see that being a reality.
Sabrina?
But what happens is that you may have thousands of parts on your physical inventory worksheets if you do enter every part number into the system. Personally, I do enter every part into the system because then I also have, for me, I also have a parts purchase history. I know who I bought it from. I know who I sold it to.
Right.
It's just my own, take on this. And does that make sense, Julie, that you would still go through that process?
Yes, it looks like that quick part would probably be, the only time we would use it is if we took an old part off of, a used part off of something else and just wanted to throw it in there.
That's exactly how I use it. And like I said, if you are going to use that feature anyway, let's jump up here into setups, repair order and parts invoices. If you actually have this inventory set up to add your buyouts to inventory list, it's just an alternative way of entering the information into the system. But again, two things on that. If you were to enter in a buyout part from this screen right here and just do it from buyout, you know, who's to say you don't already have that part number in the system? So that's where I'm kind of more old school. I do a part from part list, and I just, whether or not I even have the number, maybe I don't even think it's in there. I'm absolutely sure, 99% sure I've never bought that part. But still, instead of clicking the add a part, entering the part number and description, I still start typing the part.
Yeah.
And then I hit the add part. I've already typed the part number once, but this way I'm making doubly sure that I didn't already have the part number in the system. So, and if I think about, let's just go through this really quick. If I weren't such a terrible typist, this would be a lot prettier. Let's see, I'm going to leave it. I mean, I'm done. I mean, that's how quick it is. So there's, you know, you can say, well, it's faster to use the, let's jump in here, the buyout part. I'm going to put, let's do a bunch of 5s. And I go in here, put my cost, 3, put this in. But see, I'm just seeing that this is not as smooth as I thought it was in order to price it. Okay, so, okay. And of course, it's going to be added to my inventory. So you can see it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Now it's not going to tell me, open this back up again. Oh, it is going to tell me I'm short sold. Because remember, I told it add it to inventory, so the system can say, oh, add it to inventory, then track it. It means I need to order one. So if you check that box to add it to inventory, which adds a part number to your parts list, it's still going to prompt you to enter in the restock parts ticket, or prompt you through the order parts feature, where you just go here and add the part and order the part. So it's still going to prompt you through all those, that whole workflow. So that's, I mean, again, that's probably the only major difference is maybe one or two hitting the enter key. So I would rather, a value system for me, I'd rather just go through and make sure the part number wasn't already in inventory. So that talks a little bit. I want to jump back into that stocking. Let's go into Infinity oil filter. I want to talk a little bit about the stocking screen. So we kind of covered all of this here on the item screen, but now I want to check on the stocking screen. So if I hit on this, the best quantity, minimum quantity, let's say I have 4 in best quantity, and I have 2 in minimum quantity. So let's just say we did this for this one oil filter. Anybody using this feature right now, this stocking feature?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So now let's see what it looks like when I go into a report. So I go into reports, click on inventory, click on parts reorder, and I'm going to click on all parts for now. And click run report, and it says it lists my parts by part number or by description that need to be ordered. So I can decide how I want to order them. Let's just say by part number. So it's going to tell me right here, well, there's my oil filter. It says I need to order 4. Fuel, this is a long story, but I set up a gas station. We were playing around with fuel. But this parts reorder report right now will tell me what I need. And it also gives me a total. Now, this will say in the vendor column who I normally order it from. So I also have a separate report. Let's say I just want to see my parts from WorldPack. I can do parts reorder per vendor and then click on run report. And I could select just WorldPack, or let's say all vendors, and you'll see they're grouped. So here's what I need to order from WorldPack. This is my reorder report from WorldPack, total dollar amount. And this is what I need to order from factory, total dollar amount. Now you'll notice the tire was not on there, and I also had another oil filter on there. Now the reasons why they didn't show up was because they weren't assigned to a vendor. There wasn't a primary vendor. So it's not like I regularly purchase those parts from somebody and there was a stocking amount. Now, if I were to guess, if I go back to that report, it's going to just say one quantity of each. Let's look. Let's see. Well, fuel, okay, I'm wrong. Fuel just wasn't assigned, so it didn't come up, and that this one tire wasn't assigned, so it didn't come up. So that's a little bit about how the stocking feature works in the part record. Jump back into that part record. So here I can, in real time, see what I have on hand. Stock on hand being negative just means that there's a repair order out there that's asking to use this part. Looks like I have a purchase order already started for one, but it still says I need to order 4 to get up to my best quantity, because even after I receive this one, it's just going to bring me to 0, and then need to order will be 4. So I also, by the way, where it says -1, I can view my short sold items, and I could see what repair order is waiting for. I could see what job is waiting for that part to be ordered. Okay? So any questions on kind of this stocking screen, this portion? Because this, again, is the key to your parts inventory control setup, setting up your quantity, your best quantity, and your minimum. Any questions on that one, guys? Now, just so you know, the minimum, you have to fall below the minimum to trigger it. So if I ended up, my best quantity was 4 and I got down to 2, it still will not show up on my reorder report. It still actually has to drop below my minimum quantity for it to show up on my reorder report. And then it will tell me how many I need to order to get back to my best. So, of course, I'm sure you guys have all used this feature at one point or another. You can adjust your stock quantity if you found out that, I grease scooped that one, or somebody dropped that filter. It's dropped, they dented it, you can't use it. So you just hit subtract. I'm going to take out 1. That was my cost, and put your initials in. So now you actually show you have to buy even more to get back on track. The adjustments, a very interesting screen, very different from our old DOS version. This view adjustments just tracks, this is an actual physical adjustment to your inventory, what you purchased and what you sold. This is every time it was added to an RO, and it was deleted, and it was added, another one was added, and it was returned. So you can see this just tracks how many repair orders you actually put this part number on and off of. And then, of course, anything that you purchased would show up. In here, for example, I have a manual adjustment. So this gives you, and this is all. I can also say I only want to look at any adjustment from an RO, or just from vendor invoices, which you can see I've actually never purchased it or returned it. That's why it actually doesn't show up. So when you're looking to see, where did I buy it from, how many times did I buy it, when did I do that? If I want to see detail, I can check from vendor invoices. And here are my adjustments. Actually, it didn't show up, so I guess I didn't enter one into inventory yet. And interstore parts transfers for multi-store, by the way. So that's a little bit about how our stocking feature works. And of course, I mentioned we can view sales. I like the ability to see, I sold it to this person on this date on this RO, especially when it comes down to warranty. And then when I want to make a claim to my vendor for warranty, that's where I look at my view purchases. Of course, I haven't purchased this part from anybody yet, but that's where it would show the date I bought it, the vendor invoice it came on, quantity, cost. That way, if I have to submit a claim to NAPA or submit a claim to WorldPac for a warranted part, that's where I get my information to fill out my form. So that's a little bit about the stocking. Pricing, we've gone over the parts price matrix. We got a great webinar for that one, so I was going to skip that for now. User charges, I want to touch bases on real briefly. Again, this isn't as much about your parts inventory control, but this is where you can tie a hazardous materials fee, or let's say it's a tire. I charge $1.75 for every tire I sell, and it automatically gets added to my repair order every time I sell each one of those tires, each single individual part. If I sold 4 tires, of course, it's going to slap on a $7 charge. Vendors, again, this goes back to parts inventory control. This will let me know who I typically buy this part from, and I can reorder these. I can assign somebody else. Let's say I also buy this from whoops, not that one. I want to do CarQuest. And my cost from CarQuest, let's say it's normally $3. And I can, I can say move up or down. Let's say, when I buy it from WorldPack, which should be pretty unusual, let's say I buy it for $3 1/4 from WorldPack, typically the other way around. But I can reorder this, and let's say I want to move CarQuest up. That way I know that's who I buy it from and I get the best pricing from. So when I actually go to exit an RO and it says, Sabrina, you are missing one of these parts in inventory, you need to order them now, click in the order column, it will pick my primary vendor first. So it knows who I typically buy it from, typically because I get the best cost. And I have an option, of course, to override it, but we'll always put in the default of my #1 vendor. Now, cores, if I were to turn on the track cores feature, one thing I really want to emphasize in cores is that when you buy a part that's rebuilt and you're tracking core, nowhere in the parts record does it say you have this many, air quotes, new cores on hand. Since it's really not a physical, tangible thing, it's actually just a core charge. It's not tracked anywhere in the system as a quantity. But the second you sell a part and put a part with a core on an RO, in the system, it puts in what's called a used core in the bank. If it says when you add a part with a core charge to an RO, and you have an option that says, yes, receive core from customer, no core charge, automatically that bank will move the quantity based on the last core cost here. It will move that to a used core inventory bank. And the system from that point manages parts that you need to send back for cores that you need to send back for credit. So when it comes out of there, then it zeroes in the parts record, so you're not going to show any used cores quantity on hand. So you may have quantity of used cores at the customer, quantity of used cores in stock, and quantity of used cores at vendor. Is if you've created a purchase order for that core return, it actually shows up as a used core at vendor waiting for a credit. That's kind of a cool feature. We actually even have some reports to be able to run to manage those and make sure those come back from your vendor. The other thing you can do, you can adjust your used cores in stock. Sometimes you lose one. It happens. It walks out the door. It's just like any other inventory part. Now, we don't actually have an physical inventory worksheet for cores, but here's where you can manage them. The other thing that you might end up doing is purchasing. You may actually purchase used cores and rebuild them. So that's another feature too, where you can actually, in a restock parts ticket, just buy a used core. So that's a little bit about how the cores work. You guys have any questions on this one?
I have a question, Sabrina.
Sure.
If I purchase a brakes and it has a core, and the vendor charges me $15 for that core, okay, so we get that back from them when we give them the core, but then if we have several of those cores sitting out there, the used cores, say we have 5 of them out there, and then we buy some more, and now the vendor charges us $20 for the cores, used cores. That affects the core valuation so that it does not match the balance sheet anymore?
You know, Julie, I think you're right. Now, we do have an averaging feature. We do, and it actually has its own spot on the general ledger. Let's look at that real quick. So on our general ledger, we actually have, because it's a cost, the 50,000 account, where is it? Inventory valuation balance. Now that does happen. Parts, with the averaging, and it's usually just a few pennies up and down because it's averaging. Any cost where you actually lose, let's say you return all those and they just give you 15 bucks for them all, for example. Yeah, your system, your inventory, your used core, let's bump up to that one. Your used core inventory could be off. And then when we run a valuation, we could make an adjustment. Or for a lot of the adjustments that happen, again, they're usually just pennies. They actually are tracked down here as a cost of goods. They're tracked right here under inventory valuation balance. And this is an inventory valuation balance cost. It's an adjustment that happens in the system. Now, I'd have to run that through, Julie, a couple of times to see how it works. Because remember, we don't do parts first in, first out. It's always based on averaging. So they can get off a little bit through the year. And you're absolutely right. That was a very good call.
Mine are out all the time, every month, because the prices will change, and my valuation, my core valuation report to core inventory will be off the difference of whatever that change in the price on the cores were.
True, because it's value. I see what you're saying, valuation. You know what, Julie, I'm going to take a look at your system offline, okay? And we're going to look at that and see where we need to make an adjustment. I mean, it's kind of like with any other inventory adjustment. It would still fall under cost of goods because I'm still assuming that you're still getting the correct credit back from your vendor. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
But,
so then,
what we end up doing is making a general ledger entry at the end of the month so that it balances.
And that's true. That you would have to do. That's a part of the averaging. Now I'm hoping that they did make some adjustments, and I actually haven't gotten any insight into them at all. But they have made some adjustments to the cores tracking in the last update. I just haven't seen any of that stuff with my own eyes. I'm not exactly sure how that all works. But like I mentioned, when we do a webinar that covers the new features from the latest update, I'll make sure to touch on the cores and highlight those. So let me make a note here real quick. Cores update. Because I think that is also a key issue. I mean, like I said, that Profit Center report I think is fantastic, and I want to make sure people know how to use that. But I think the nuts and bolts of the core tracking, any changes or improvements in there, I want to understand them a little bit better, and I'll share them with you as well. But that's what most people are giving me feedback on, is that they do a slight monthly adjustment at the end of the month. But I like to know how much of that is going to be going away with this new update. Like I said, I just don't know the nuts and bolts of that feature change. Okay, any other questions in the cores department? You know, the last thing I have some questions on cross-references. Was there ability to run a report based on a cross-reference number? Now, the inventory report, if I just do a general inventory list, if I were to put in a cross-reference number here, it won't show up. It does not show up. Is there any circumstance you guys can think of where you would want to run a report based on cross-reference part numbers? Or was that just kind of an isolated question that I had? Okay, so really nothing along those lines. Okay. So we covered a little bit about online parts, how those are added to inventory, how the parts records are managed, how we do stocking, and a little bit about the cores. And I think it's worthwhile to just kind of explore all these different inventory reports and how you can best use them. It's really, it comes down to how much do you want to stock and how much do you need to stock, with especially online parts ordering and just-in-time delivery. We really don't have nearly as much need for that as we did years ago. But, you know, if you do stock filters, fluids, like I said, a lot of people do still stock rubber, belts and hoses. that's something that you might want to look into. We also have a dead stock report coming out in the next update. So if you have a lot of stock that's just been sitting there and you need to get it back, especially tune-up parts, we have that happen a lot. We are going to have a dead inventory or dead stock report we're going to be able to do, and it will print up a whole list of parts that we need to get back, sent back to by vendor in order to get credits on that. So it's all, again, that inventory control. Last thing I want to touch on then is under Parts Manager, we can also update our inventory pricing. And what you can do is you can say, I want to update all parts, for example, by a certain amount. And this is a markup on your existing prices. Let's say I want to do a 3% increase across the board on the manual price or the profit margin. We do have a feature to be able to do that. And you also have an option in the part record to not allow this across-the-board inventory pricing update. So let me show you really quick in the parts record where that's at. Where is it? Allow auto update. So on your pricing screen, we can say, do not ever let me do it across the board auto pricing update on this part. It'll always be the same no matter what. So that's another feature. I've had a few shops use it. They usually do it once or twice a year for their existing stock. Again, it's only your stocked inventory, what you have currently. So that's how that feature works. And then the last part, of course, is to take a physical inventory. Pretty self-explanatory, but you'll notice you can create a worksheet, and it says once you create the physical inventory pages, you must count and post the physical inventory before any other inventory activity, meaning closing out ROs, is done. Do you want to continue and create the physical inventory? Yes. And what you can do is you can decide how you want to sort it. Remember I told you location is very cool. Now you could actually do this whole physical inventory worksheet report. Let's do it by part number just for now, because I don't think I have a location on my demo material. And once I create this physical inventory worksheet, of course I only have 2 pages, and a lot of people usually have like 200. I don't have to track every part here. I can just say, okay, ended up having 2 of these, ended up having 0 of that. I may not actually change anything else on this whole page, because everything else is the same. I would put my initials in here and say it's completed, and it's done. Now what happens, says this page is marked as completed, but it has items that don't have a new quantity. Are you sure you want to continue? And what that means, guys, is just that this old quantity is right. I'm not making other changes because I don't need to. And it says the items that you do not enter a quantity will not be used when the physical inventory is posted. So it's saying it's only going to post my changes. Okay? So then when I post, yes, absolutely.
Oh, there, I see it.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure can. And then let's say I didn't even touch anything on page 1. I don't have to. I'm going to say page is complete. I never even made a change. It's fine. And then I can just post my worksheet. And when I click this post worksheet, it's actually going to change just those 2 things I entered, those 2 SERP belts, those 2 serpentine belts. So that's really how those inventory worksheets work. So I know there's some people that say I do inventory once a year. I have this one shop, they do tire inventory every week. Now I feel it's pain because we actually did tire inventory usually once a month during the winter months because we just had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of snow tires. So the thing is what's nice about that physical inventory worksheet is you only have to do a physical inventory for the portion of parts that you want to. Now you can't actually run a report to only include tires or run a report that only includes tune-up parts. So worksheets are generated for a snapshot of your entire inventory, but you only have to make the changes on the parts that you want to. And then you post it, it'll only affect those parts records that you entered new amounts in. Does that make sense? So I think that if people understood a little bit more about how that feature worked, they might want to go back in and do a physical inventory a little more often. And of course, any changes that I just did in my physical inventory show up in my accounting in my, I want to show you where it shows up. It shows up in my inventory adjustments. So this is where it's pretty important to do an inventory at the end of the year so you guys at least get this as a tax write-off. I mean, if you're going to lose the parts or get damaged parts or, you know, parts grow legs and walk out the door, at least you want to get the tax benefit. And that way when you start your balance sheet in January for your new year, your actual physical inventory is going to be the correct amount. Any questions on the physical inventory part? Okay. Well, I didn't have anything else for today, you guys. Did you have any other issues or questions or any other subject on the parts inventory you wanted to cover? Okay, guys. Well, I will look forward to seeing you on next week's webinar. We are going to have an open forum webinar 2 weeks from today, and we're just going to try this one out. Just email me a question or a subject that you're interested in discussing, and we're going to discuss it during the open forum. I also want to introduce you in that webinar in 2 weeks to our online forum. It's a forum for members on our website where we really want to start the community posting questions or suggestions, all sorts of different things that apply to your business. So we want to kind of have a community forum out there. So I'll talk a little bit about how to get set up on that in 2 weeks from today. I won't be doing a webinar the last week of July, and all of August is focused on a 4-part webinar series of MotorTraxx to MaxxTraxx Pro conversions, since we still have hundreds of people on our DOS version who still haven't made the jump. They will be archived. I'm not sure if that would be of interest to anybody on the call, but we will be talking about, on different days, different subjects. We're going to be talking about accounting on the 3rd week. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about setting up your accounting, if your general ledger isn't already up to snuff, we are going to do a 2-hour, kind of a 2-hour marathon of setting up your general ledger in September, but this is more going to be just kind of the nuts and bolts for new users. And frankly, if you're not using accounting now and that's something you might want to entertain doing, maybe starting January 1st, you guys might find that webinar interesting. So make sure you check out our website, sign up for any future webinars, and we'll talk to you next time, okay?
Okay.
Have a great week, guys.